Hey everybody, it's Eric with District 82 Pinball. I haven't done a walkthrough video on what I did to fix stuff and what broke since the last big tournament. So I wanted to do that here today. Alright, so what do we got? We got a lot of games that broke. There were a lot of like little things here and there that I'm probably just not going to address. So let's just go with the ones that a lot of people, well, the major ones essentially, okay? So here we go. First of all, Slimer. I got a headlamp on here. So Slimer, I'm in Slimer test right now, and every time you hit Slimer here, it activates that switch there, right? So he's kind of hard to adjust. This is a premium, so he doesn't just go like up and down like the Pro. He actually swings side to side, and then you got to hit him to actually activate, you know, to get the Slimer hits. Now, if it's too low, he'll hit his butt across this thing. If it's too high, the ball won't actually touch Slimer to activate the switch. So it's just kind of a fine line of how to adjust that, and it's just trial and error. And over time, it gets out of adjustment, so you got to go back there and do it again. Okay, so let's move on down the line. I know this. You know, someone said, "Hey, it was out of level." So real quick, I checked it and fixed it. Silverball Mania. On this one, what do we got? When people were flipping it, they're just hitting the flipper, and they're scoring points, okay? All the little weirdness there is because of the refresh rate on the camera. What it ended up being was the A switch was too tight. So all I had to do was lift. So how did I figure that out? Well, first of all, I started a brand new game, and I just started flipping. And then I noticed the A light went out, and it was adding points still. So you can also go into switch test, which will actually just point out that, hey, it's the A switch. But I just had to readjust that, and that fixed it. Star Wars, Data East Star Wars. The ball got stuck in the VOOC. So the ball went in there, it actually counted it, never came out again. Real quick, lift the play field. Take a look down here, and the wire had broken off. I believe it's that purple one right there. Resoldered the wire, everything fixed. That's actually pretty easy and straightforward. It's either that or the ball goes in the hole and it doesn't count it, and the switch isn't activating. But then during a ball search, it would kick it out. So this did a ball search, it never kicked it out. Therefore, it's going to be the coil, and it ended up just being the wire fell off. Okay, Meteor. The left flipper didn't work. So the note was, hey, the left flipper's dead. I came over, flipped the flipper a whole bunch of times. It did not work. So what it ended up being is the EOS switch. Even though this is, you know, you can tell it's a newer EOS switch right here. The power goes from the flipper button here, okay, through the game, and then through this switch right here. And if the switch is out of adjustment or too dirty, it will not give high power, you know, full power to the flipper, and it won't activate. So I had to clean the switch, and the game worked again. A quick test is just to have somebody hold the flipper button down, and you literally just push on this, you know, if you're, you know, not the faint of heart, and you can see the flipper activate, then you know it's just a dirty EOS switch or out of adjustment. The commas. You can see this one on the stream. The game was being played, and there were not any commas on the display. The commas right here. So it was really hard to read it, especially when everyone's hitting 20, you know, tens of millions of points. It ended up just being a loose ribbon cable on the display itself. So I reseated the ribbon cable, which fixed the issue momentarily. I have to go back and see if the ribbon cable is actually the cause, or if it's actually the circuit board needs to be reflowed. Okay, Johnny Mnemonic. This one had a couple issues. Early on, one of the diverters didn't work. So these are the diverters up here. You got this diverter, which puts the ball into the vertical up kicker, and then this diverter back here. How do I do this one? Which puts the ball up into the pops. So first one of them broke. I fixed it, and then later on the other one broke, and they both had literally the exact same issue. Which on this era of pinball machine, is usually when they don't work what the issue is. So they're both the same here. You can see this little, so you got a couple of springs. So this is the diverter mech, okay? And you got the spring right here that pushes it back. But then you got this little spring right here that actually connects this arm to the plunger. And this is what actually breaks. That spring right there, that little tiny spring, is usually what actually snaps. So everything still works properly. It's just that the plunger is no longer hooked up to the diverter arm. So that way it activates, but it doesn't actually engage on top. So you can buy a new spring. These are extremely stiff. What I did is actually I just bent the wire back out again, so I lost roughly a half a turn on it, and then just reattached them both, you know, and did it to both of them. This one was the same way. It's kind of hidden behind the wires here, but I bent them both back, and that fixed it. Good to go. Okay, let's move on down the line here. Lots of stuck balls, the usual. Nothing big. Okay, this one. Last action hero. Okay, the most important shot on this game, or one of the most important shots, is to start the mode, which is this hole right here. Now, you got another hole right here, and there's a switch in the middle, and then there's a switch on the end. So the game knows which hole it goes in based on which of the switches activate. You know, if this one activates, then it knows it went in that one. If only that switch activates, then it knows it went in the mode start hole. Okay, so from underneath, what was happening is the ball went in the mode start hole. It would not start the mode, but it would kick back out again. And on this particular one, what it was this switch right here was just a little bent out of adjustment. So the ball would actually be sitting in there, but not down further. You know, the switch wasn't pushed down further enough to actually activate the switch. So I literally just bent the switch wire, that blade you're looking at right there, back up. So that way now it has less play in it, less slop, and when the ball sits on it, it activates. All right. Oh, Roadshow. Okay, here we go. Flipper button. I actually had, I think, 3 flipper buttons break. So here's the original flipper buttons on this game. They're yellow. While they were playing, literally the flipper button just broke off. And I think I had 3 of those happen this weekend. So what ends up happening is this little mushroomed plastic tip right here eventually just gets wore off. You know, every time it goes in and out, in and out, in and out, it's putting a little pressure on it. Not to mention you got the metal switchblade pushing it, you know, back out again from the angle of this one in my hand here. And eventually it just breaks off, and then the whole and then the thing just falls apart. So, and I know I fixed like 2 of them during the game. So essentially I just, you know, they caught a ball or whatever, took the ball out, lifted the playfield up, unscrewed the PAL nut while the game was active, and then just got another flipper button, stuck it in there, screwed the PAL nut back on, put everything back down, put the ball back on their flipper, good to go. And I also had a few different plunger tips where we're just chewed up and nasty. This might have been one of them, I don't remember. But you know, they don't live forever, you know, so if you have to replace a plunger tip, you just get a bag of them, and you're good to go. Okay. Flintstones, the pop bumper. I'm actually very impressed someone wrote this one down. So that pop bumper right there was actually loose. There, that one next to his head there was actually loose, in that whenever the ball hit it, the whole thing would kind of wobble back and forth. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I know what that is. So I just unscrewed the cap, took the cap off, and then there's 2 longer screws that hold the whole body to the playfield. I just tightened those up. They just happen to back out a little bit. That just happens with a lot of play. You want to fix that, you know, when you see it. Otherwise, eventually, instead of the screws backing out, they'll actually just chew the wood up on their way out, and then it'll be a big mess, and it won't really ever tighten down again. Okay. F14 Tomcat. The left orbit switch. This one, the player noticed that they were hitting the bonus X here on this switch, but it wasn't actually awarding it. So they do the orbit this way, and they would not get the multiplier. It ended up just being, this switch was a little just out of adjustment. Just needed to go in there and adjust it. And when I say adjust it, I'm just talking about bending things, so that way it activates again. It's really hard to see, I guess, from this angle, but there's a switch that's similar to this one right here on the other side. So the game knows you know, which way it went in the orbit and such. Newer games have like a slit in the playfield, and they have the switch coming out of there, whereas on this particular game, they had them above the playfield instead of below it, making it's more difficult to adjust these style than it is the other ones. All right, Frontier. Frontier had a couple issues. Someone said the left flipper was dead. It ended up being an end of stroke switch again. So this one, you know, it just was a matter of just bending these switch blades tighter together and cleaning the contact, and that ended up fixing it. And the second thing was, they had a very good explanation. They said the flipper worked, but they couldn't tap pass from the right to the left. And I was like, wow, that's you know, pretty specific. So I went over here, and sure enough, when you just lightly would hit this flipper, this is the flipper mech from the bottom, it would actually stick up. So to show you that from the top, you know, you'd tap this lightly, and it would just like stay. It wouldn't actually come back down again. It would just get stuck there. And it was like, but if you hit it hard, you know, it'd go all the way up and it'd fall without a problem. So when I came down and looked at it, this little plastic nut right here, or this part was just chewed up. It was totally wore out, and it had like a flat spot on it. So essentially, when you would push it just a little bit, it would just get stuck there. So I ended up just rebuilding this flipper, new plunger, new part of this, and I think it looks like I just left the coil stop on there. But that ended up fixing it. No more issues. Okay, Jungle Lord. Jungle Lord. One of the big targets that you always hit are these 5 drop targets up on the upper play field. One of them wasn't working all the time. It just wouldn't count. So when you come down here on the bottom, this is a System 7. This is the upgraded version from the previous ones. The switches are actually underneath here. So the drop target comes down and actually lands on the switch instead of these horseshoe things that are on the older generation. So these are actually easier to adjust and clean. It turned out just the switch was dirty. So I just took some alcohol on a Q-tip and wiped, since one of them was bad, I just wiped all 5 of them. Once I did that, the problem never came back. So it was just a dirty switch. Okay, this one was a unique one, the high score. It's kind of hard, since I'm going to show you displays, it's kind of hard to see on the camera. But what was happening is it was cycling through last game played and the high score. And at the time, you know, the high score looked like it was 200 something thousand, blah, blah, blah. But yet if I went into, but the first digit was all screwed up. It had a 2, but then it looked like it almost had a 1 superimposed on top of it. So it was a 2, but then that one was covered up. So maybe like a lowercase a, I guess, is kind of what it looked like. So ultimately what it was somebody had rolled it. Someone got over 1 million points. And on this ROM revision, it was actually trying to show you 1,200,000 something. So all I did to clear that, I don't have 7-digit displays in here, I have 6-digit displays. So I just went through and cleared the memory of the high score, and now it looks fine. And actually, when you played all the games were fine. People were concerned that they couldn't see the first 100,000th digit. It never was an issue. It was only when it's just rocking back between high score and last score, like it's doing right now, that the issue was there. Okay, this one, the right flipper stopped working. Or sorry, the right flipper was sticking up. Okay, so this is Doctor Who. Okay, this is one of the first WPC games, or the earlier ones. They used these funky flipper mechs here. Here's the one that was ultimately replaced. It is just wore out. You can see here the solder joint is broke that was holding this thing together. And this is actually like someone's homemade fix anyway, that I didn't really notice when I brought it in here. But it worked great for like, 4 years, so it worked fine. So what I ended up doing, instead of putting the original one back in here, this flipper board is fine, but I don't actually have one of these old school arms. I do have plenty of the new ones. So I just put a new board, which are slightly smaller, and then the plastic one that actually has 2 optos instead of a single opto. But the connector's still the same down here, so I didn't have to make any adjustments or anything like that. I just flipped it all out to what the new style stuff is, and then I left the left-hand side one alone, and everything works great. Okay, let's go show some more stuff. Yeah, all this stuff happened in a couple days, and all of it was fixed in a couple days as well. Okay, attack from Mars. The left flipper stopped working. What ended up happening is this Allen head screw and nut behind it had actually backed out and fell out. And so then the flipper was no longer attached to the plunger, similar to that diverter I was showing you earlier. So it's really hard to kind of put it all back in together again. So I just rebuilt a left flipper, and it was all said and done. That seems to be happening a lot on these new flippers, where this backs out from the nut. The problem is you can't just like tighten it up, because if you tighten it up, then it's going to pinch onto this plastic, and then it doesn't flip anymore. So there's kind of a fine line there of too tight or too loose. Okay, nothing over there. Sky Kings. Oh yeah, Sky Kings. So Sky Kings, the left flipper was getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and then all of a sudden it just got stuck. It got stuck up. So when I came over to look at it, I opened the coin door and I could smell it. The left flipper coil was burnt to a crisp, and the left EOS. Actually, I should show you this side. This is the original flipper mech, but and I changed it to something else because that's what I had. So this little arm right here, you can see how it's kind of floppy on the original mechs, and then it actually opens up the EOS switch. Now the EOS switch then cuts the high power to the coil, so when you're holding it up, you don't burn up the coil. So what happened is this little thing broke off on that side, and then people were still playing it as normal, and they're holding the left flipper up, and eventually just burnt the coil. Coil got so hot that it melted, and then it stuck the flipper up. At which point they called me over and I shut the game off. So I didn't actually have, this is an older flipper mech from like 70 to 74 is when they had this. I didn't have one of those at home. I got plenty of these, which is the replacement from 75 to 81 on the Bally's. And yeah, so I just used that. The coil, you have to have the right coil. It's definitely a different coil. So I had one of those, and then I just used the original EOS switch that was on there, and just changed all the flipper stuff over to the new one. You can't tell from the top; it actually flips with the same strength. But now, if everything breaks, I got the parts that I have a million parts for. So, all right, next. Playfield fuse pop bumper. All right, I was called over. The ball was just sitting in here and not doing anything. So I'm like, all right, and I could flip it. You know, I could flip. It was flipping. So if it's flipping, and the ball's sitting in there, but not kicking out, there's no ball search. So either that switch is dead, or the coil doesn't work, or the playfield fuse is out. Well, when I'm talking about the playfield fuse, there's one fuse that powers the playfield. Is that one right there. So the solenoid power comes from the back box. It goes to your flippers, and then from your flippers it goes to that fuse, and then from that fuse it goes to every other coil under the playfield. Okay, so that fuse was burnt, so I quickly replaced it because I was like, well, there's a chance it's just a fuse, and that chance was wrong. Once we put the fuse in, the left pop bumper locked on. Okay, so the left pop bumper locks on, turn the game off. Look at the left pop bumper underneath. The switch is actually adjusted correctly. So I'm like, well, that means we probably have a board issue. It turned out the transistor was short on the board. I changed the transistor. I put it all back together again. I turned it on. And when I turned it on, it did not energize. So I was like, all right, great. So first time I activated that pop bumper, it stayed locked on again. So, and then blew the fuse. So, after thinking about it for a second, I was a little quick in my assessment. All these coils have diodes, all right? So you see how the diode is nice and neat on this green one right here? Because that's the original. This one is all janky because I fixed it, because it was actually broken off. The diode was broken off, and when you have the diode broken off, it'll activate one time great, and then once it deactivates, it sends a backrush of current, and if there's no diode there, it'll blow your transistor again, which it did. So I ended up having to fix the diode, fix the transistor a second time, put it all back together again with another fuse, and now it works fine. So when your playfield fuse goes, first of all, you want to have it be the proper value, which in this case is 1 amp, so it didn't damage. I didn't have a coil that burnt to a crisp, because had I had like a 10 amp fuse in there or something, that pop bumper coil would have been smoking hot and burnt up before it eventually would have popped the main fuse for the solenoids, which is in the back box behind that lady. So that's the reason for having the proper fuses. Okay, next one, Royal Rumble, right upper playfield. Okay, this switch kind of got stuck, and it was just a matter of coming in here and adjusting it. It happens once in a while when you got these swinging gates. If somebody hits it like just right or at a weird angle or super hard, you know, they just get a lot of adjustments. So I did that. And the other thing is this little part broke off right here, which is on the launch. You can see it right back here. So I don't know if this is an aftersight in the developing of this game, but there's a gate there, and then right behind it is two star posts. So every time you launch a ball, it hits this gate, hits this gate, hits this gate, hits this gate. Eventually it just broke. You don't really need it because behind it you got those star posts that would actually also rebound it, but those would break eventually too. So I just bent a new wire, stuck it in there, and that's fixed. Okay, what do we got? BMX, 2 issues. A bushing was broken, and then also the coil machine gunning. So before we even started, one of our guys was cleaning this, I think it was Brett, and noticed that this flipper was just super floppy. Okay, so instead of it just having a nice clean snap, it would actually have some wobble to it when you could touch it. So the way these work is you got the whole flipper mech under the playfield, right? That I showed you. Here, I'll show you right here. You got this whole flipper mech, right? And then you see this little plastic part right here? That's the thing that attaches the flipper to this mech, okay? You got this bushing that runs through the playfield. That's the part that actually goes through the playfield right here, okay? And then pokes out the other side, and your flipper is inside of it, okay? So if your flipper's inside of this bushing, I'm trying to do this with one hand. Okay, that keeps it like correct. If it's broken, it usually breaks right here at the base. Okay, and then your flipper is just kind of flopping around, and then it actually will cut a wear mark into your playfield. You can see it on the electromechanical pinballs a lot. That's kind of in an arc. So if you see an arc cut in on either one of on the paint of the playfield, a high likelihood the flipper bushing is broken, or it was in the past, you know. So it should not drag across the playfield. The other thing is, it says coil machine gunning. So what would happen is you'd flip the ball, or flip the playfield, and instead of the flipper just staying upright like that, it would go. And what that is the low power hold was not working. Okay, because the low power is actually what holds it up. But if that's not working, it'll fall back down, it'll re-engage the EOS switch, which will then kick it up, but then it doesn't work, and then it falls down, and it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So the high power is continually flicking it back up, and they call that machine gunning. So I actually had this happen on 2 different games, and both times it was actually the low hold winding was broken on the coil. And actually, there's like a 50% chance you can fix them, and both of them were on the wrong side of the 50% chance. So I couldn't fix either of them, and just had to replace the coil. Okay, what else we got? I'm getting there. Remember, this is one big tournament. Okay, 8-ball champ. The drop target, you just kept hitting the drop target over and over again, it would not drop. What ended up being was every one of these drop here. It wasn't this drop target, but you can see it a lot better on this one. See the spring? Oh, actually right here. The spring right there on the drop target was broken. So there was no force to pull it down once you hit it. because once you hit the drop target, it drops, right? And the spring is what causes that to fall down. If it's broken off, it won't drop. If it won't drop, you can't score the points. So I fixed that by just putting a new spring on it. Okay. Actually, I think I just fixed the old spring, just rebent the end. All right, next one, Matahari.
I must ask, who sent you my way?
So what happened is the ball would go into the saucer and not kick out. And since there is no ball search or anything like that on an early solid state pinball, the ball would just sit there and nothing would happen. So like with memory lane, I said, well, it's either the switch, it's the coil or the playfield fuse, etc. In this case, it was the switch. Now you can see these two little metal tabs right here. They force the ball into that switch, and they do, you know, even though they're metal, you know, you'd think that they'd never get out of adjustment. But the more pitch you have on the game, you know, because I have the games pitched as far as I can, you know, going this way, so it actually plays faster, right? Well, if I have it pitched the opposite direction of those tines, they really have to be adjusted right to push the ball back onto that switch. And that little button right there is actually the switch. If you push it down, you can see that activates. So what happened is it was just enough out of adjustment to where the ball could actually land in there and then not fall on the switch. So my fix was I had to just bend those tines a little bit more to force the ball onto that switch. Okay. Couple more and then we're done. So we got a couple more down the aisles here. What else we got? Okay, Monster Bash. The spinner switch, the person said that you'd spin it and you get like 1 or 2 spins even though you rip the spinner. Okay, I don't have the playfield glass off on this one, but you can see right there, you see that? That's the switch body of that switch, and there's 2 screws holding it. One of those screws was backed out, so the switch was not nice and taut on the spinner essentially. So it would spin, but it would only count like 1 time because the switch body was moving around. So I just tightened up those screws, and that it actually just put it right back in its own adjustment correctly. And now every spin counts again. Okay, Vector works perfectly. Never had an issue with it ever. So there you go, McCarty. Okay, next one. Oh, left ramp switch on Spider-Man. You'd hit the left ramp and it wouldn't count it. It ended up just being this switch right here. You can see that right there. That little switch blade comes up, and when you hit that wire form, it just kind of pushes that switch in. It was just out of adjustment. It happens. So I just had to bend that switch blade a little more so it was a little more sensitive, and that fixed that. Do you have Theater of Magic? Yeah, we got Theater of Magic. Okay. Next one, mousing around actually had 2 different issues. First, the easy one, they said the left flipper was dead. On this version of System 11 Pinball, there's actually a fuse for both the left flipper and the right flipper. So if one of the flippers is dead but the other one works, obviously check the fuses. There's an alternate driver board right here behind these, on this side of the game. That wasn't the case in this one. I lifted the playfield up and immediately saw one of the wires was busted off. So I resoldered the wire back on. That fixed the flipper. The other issue was the ball would drain. So you'd lose the ball, right, past the flippers, and then it would take a while for the game to recognize that you lost the ball. So one of those times when it was taking forever, I quickly went into test mode and into switch levels, which actually tells you all the switches that are active at the time. And what it told me was that balls trough switch number 2 was not working. So under the playfield, you got your 3 switches here. This is switch 1 because that's the one touching the first ball here. Switch 2, and then switch 3. And when you follow it back, you can see, you know, which ones are which. It looked like it was in proper adjustment, no issues at all whatsoever. It just was intermittent every once in a while. So what I ended up doing is I just replaced this switch. Once I replaced this switch, the issue never came back. Rarely is it actually the switch itself, but in this case it was. Usually this stuff gets out of adjustment, or you know, this mechanism like caught one of the arms and bent it or something. That wasn't the case. The switch was actually just wore out, and so I had to finally replace the switch. Okay, this one, the ball went into the saucer way back there. Oh boy, it's hard to see. Let me try to, right there, way in the back of the playfield, there's a saucer back there. It's kind of hard to hit, except when this ramp lifts up and then you hit it back behind there and it goes in the saucer. So the ball would sit in the saucer and it never came out. Unfortunately, this game does not have a ball search either. So if there's no ball search, your game is pretty much done. What I ended up being is just that switch was dirty. Literally, that's it. So I alcoholed that switch, Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol, and once I did that, it's worked ever since. So I think that's it. So those are all the games that broke at District 82 Pinball during the Great Lakes Pinball Open, and also during our next Tilton Tuesday, which was a couple days later. But everything's fixed, up and working. Just want to do this quick video so you guys can see, you know, what happens when things are played a lot. None of these issues were a big deal at all to me. So you just got to get it fixed, go through it, and get it ready for the next tournament. Thanks for watching.